Hello everybody, my name is Kara, and today I'm here to do my reading goals check-in for 2019 and talk about some of my goals for the new year, and also share a few stats, but like not really, they're the stats I like to track, which are very minimal. I'll leave timestamps for the various sections of this video in case you only care about one part, but let's get started with checking in with my 2019 reading goals. I really didn't set that many. I talk about in the video actually how like I realized that I don't do well with really strict goals, which is true, but I had forgotten I said that, and I think one or two of the goals that I was thinking I had set were actually from the year before, so it was a surprise to see what I thought I was going to do this year, but for the most part it went pretty well. My Goodreads goal was to read 80 books in 2019, which I definitely did. And then another big goal I really wanted to do was kind of balancing reading in challenges versus mood reading. So I really wanted to move some of those books that had been on my TBR for a really long time. I really wanted to move those out, to finally read them and to either decide I enjoy them and I want to keep them or unhaul them. And I did really well with that part, but the other part of that goal was mood reading, which I did not do quite as well with. I think I'm getting better at it, but that's still something I really want to focus on, that I want to get back to because it's something I enjoy that I don't do enough of. And then as for the challenges, I had 3 that I specifically wanted to do. One of them was my BookTube friends choosing my TBR. By the way, I will link all of these original videos if you would like to watch them. And I didn't quite achieve that one, but I don't really count that as a fail because even at the time, like I even said, like I wasn't trying to get those all read in 2019. I just wanted to get them kind of a long-term goal. And I did make some pretty good progress on that goal. I also did the 2019 Retelling Bingo Challenge from Cornerfolds, which I really, really enjoyed, and I did pass that one. And then my friend Giselle and I also did kind of a 5-star predictions exchange, which I have really enjoyed doing, and I only have 1 book left to read for that, so I also count that as a success. Because again, that wasn't one that was time sensitive, I just wanted to do that at some point. I also mentioned the Artemis Fowl read-along. I will link the playlist for that whole project that we did down below. That was definitely a highlight of my year, not just reading year, just like year in general. I had so much fun reading with you guys. Thank you to everybody who joined in or who cheered us on from the sidelines. It was just a delight to revisit that series that I love so much, and to get to talk about it with you guys and to get to talk about it with Giselle and Taylor. I mean, I actually became friends with Taylor through that read-along. Giselle I had already known and was friends with, but I just love that not only was it a really wonderful experience, but I got to make a really close friend through it. It was just a great time all around. And then another thing I talked about is my physical TBR tracker, which I actually didn't grab, but it's pretty basic. I just like have an inside and an outside where I track all of the books that I bring into my physical TBR versus all the ones that I move off my physical TBR, whether that is through reading or unhauling or whatever. And this is kind of a success and a failure because I did do it. I stuck to it the whole year, but I don't know if it actually helped me as much as I thought it would, because kind of one of the reasons I talked about for doing it was that I feel like I'm a pretty good, like I read a lot of books in a month, and I feel like even though I do buy a lot of books or acquire a lot of books, I think that usually kind of balances out with the number that I read each month, and I wanted to check myself. Good thing I did, because that doesn't actually always happen. But the reason I don't feel like the physical TBR tracker was as much as a success as I wanted it to be, is that I don't know if it actually helped me change my book acquisition habits, rather than, like, I feel like it just made me feel guilty about them. So I'm still working out a way where I can use that to inspire me to really work through my physical TBR. Like, I still want to buy books. I'm not going to stop doing that, but I would like to use this as an opportunity to be more specific about the ones that I'm buying, like ones that I just want to read like very soon after that, rather than like a book is on sale so I buy it because I know I'll want to read it someday, that kind of thing. Like I'm definitely not going for like a minimalist lifestyle. That's not really me. But I do want to use that tracker as a way to pay more attention to my habits, and not like make myself feel so bad about them that I just stop caring about it, because I think sometimes what happens is once you break a resolution or a goal, you're like, well, fine, it doesn't matter, I'm going to do whatever I want. And I don't want that to happen. So that was kind of my goal check-in, which I think I did really well at. I'll be doing the 2020 reading goals at the end here. But first we're going to talk about some of my 2019 reading stats. And like I mentioned, I guess it's kind of unfair to even call these stats because I track very few things. I'm not a spreadsheet person. I really enjoy watching other people's, but for me personally, I don't want it to feel I don't want to create this whole series of obligations around reading a book. I actually really love using Goodreads, so that has been great these last few years. But yeah, I don't really have like, I don't use one of those spreadsheets. I don't have like a really fancy bullet journal. So the average rating for the books that I read in 2019 was 3.6, which I am pretty happy with. I'd like that to be higher. Actually, in 2018 it was 3.7, so I actually went down a little bit. But you know, I think 3.6 is still solid. I had a whole like discussion video I did recently, which I will also link. Sorry for all the links. But I have a whole discussion video where I talked about feeling ashamed of loving books, and especially of giving 5-star reviews out. And I really do think that we should be getting better about finding books we love. So I hope to actually love more books in 2020, even though 2019 was an amazing reading year for me. I would love to have fewer 1-star books, for example. And then as far as rereads versus new books, I reread 17 books of the 226 that I read. Did I even tell you how many books I read that last year? I'm doing this all out of order. Sorry, I'm like pre-filming a ton of videos and also doing laundry in between all of these. So my brain is in like 7 different places and it's not a good thing. Anyway, I read 226 books in the year 2019, which I am absolutely thrilled with. I don't know how that happened. I don't anticipate that happening again in the near future, but I loved it. That was great. So anyway, 17 of those were rereads and 209 of those were new books. Now we're going to move into my genre statistics. This is something I started doing last year that I really enjoyed. I think last year was the first year I did it, where I talk about how many books in particular genres I read. And this year I did something different where I actually averaged the ratings for each of those genres, because I want to check in with how good I am at picking things that I like. And I also want to be clear, like, the reason I'm tracking this is not because I want to use it as an excuse to give up on a particular genre. I've seen people do that and I don't like that. So that's not what I'm trying to do here. I just want to kind of reevaluate how I'm picking books, and there are a couple of these numbers that are actually really surprising in a good way. So that's really nice. And I'll also kind of explain how I categorize things as we go, because there are a few things where, like, this is very arbitrary and this is kind of for my own personal interest, and of course sharing it with you guys. So it's not a hard and fast science. Like, obviously there's lots of overlapping genres. There's lots of books that fit into multiple ones. In general, I tend to categorize it with the genre element that I feel is strongest in the book. So for historical fiction, I read 28 books and I had an average rating of 3.46. So that's like pretty good. I'd like it to be a little higher. And historical fiction is an example of one where there's a lot of overlap, because sometimes there's historical fiction with a mystery thriller element, sometimes it's historical fantasy, and in those cases it's like, depending on the book, I will categorize them differently, and it makes sense in my head, but it's very hard to explain. So anyway, historical fiction did pretty well. For the mystery genre, I read only 3 books and it was a 3.25 average rating, which kind of makes sense to me. I don't feel like I do tend to enjoy books that are just straight up mysteries. I like it when it's mixed with other genres, so that is something I would like to explore more. One of my really big surprises was science fiction. I read 12 books that were sci-fi and had an average rating of 3.56, which is actually pretty good considering how down I felt about sci-fi this last year. I've mentioned this in like 3 or 4 videos now, but I really did feel like 2019 was a bad year for sci-fi for me. Like, I was picking up a lot of things I didn't like, a lot of hyped things that I didn't like. And I think the reason this happened is that I read a lot of the ones I didn't like near the later part of the year, so those were the ones that stuck in my mind. But when I was going through and writing down like how many science fiction books I read, I actually, like, there were some that I really, really loved that I forgot about. Like the Binti series, although I didn't like the ending of that one, I really enjoyed that trilogy overall. That was something that I read kind of earlier in the year. So sci-fi was not as bad as I thought. And then another kind of shocking one, although it shouldn't be, is I read 19 nonfiction books, which is great. I'm really happy with how much nonfiction I've been reading. And I had an average rating of 4.34 stars. That's amazing. And I think the reason that that happened is because nonfiction, I'm very, very, very specific with what I pick up, because I feel like nonfiction, more than any fiction genre for me, is something where I have to be in exactly the right mood to read it. And I think I'm being more mindful of that. And on top of that, I'm getting really good at honing in on what I like to read about in nonfiction, so I'm really happy with that number. And then we have one of my kind of catch-all categories that, to me, it makes sense to group these together. But I have urban fantasy / paranormal books / any kind of like magical creature kind of books, which I guess is kind of urban fantasy. So I read 22 of those and I had an average rating of 3.7, which is also a lot higher than I thought. I tend to think of urban fantasy as something that, like, it's not a subgenre of fantasy I really enjoy, but I think the fact that this genre was so mixed, like, this was one of the ones where I really noticed I was having a hard time fitting books into certain categories. So I think this genre ended up catching a lot of different kinds of books, and I think that's why the rating ended up higher. For magical realism or fabulism, I read 13 books with an average rating of 3.69, which I think also makes sense because Anna Marie McLemore is one of my absolute favorite authors in the world, and they write magical realism. I read several of their books last year, so that's where some of the high ratings come from. But then on the other side of things, magical realism is a genre where if it's done badly, I absolutely hate it. Or magical realism, or fabulism, I should say. So I think that's why that one ended up there. And then for contemporary, I had felt like I read a lot of contemporary last year, and I feel like that is pretty accurate, because I read 34 contemporary books, and I had an average rating of 3.93, which is something I never thought would happen. That makes me so happy. I remember a few years ago I thought I didn't like contemporary, and now I'm just getting really good at picking up ones I'll enjoy. We're starting to get more variety in the kinds of contemporary stories we're telling, like the voices that we're hearing from and the kinds of stories, and it's just been great. We have another kind of like Kara genre that I made up. Our next one is stories, tales, or anthologies, or I also included graphic novels in these. And that's because I feel like, so this includes like books of fairy tales and things like that, but also anthologies that tend to all feature like a certain kind of story, like A Thousand Beginnings and Endings by Ellen O. That one is in here because even though stories are different genres, they're all kind of retellings of Asian folklore or Asian fairy tales. So that's kind of why I categorized those there. And then graphic novels, I didn't read a lot of those, but I feel like to me it made most sense to put them in that category. Could I explain why? No, but that's how I did it. And I read 9 of those with an average rating of 3.92, which is also very high. And then next is classics, and I think I have finally settled on how I want to designate my classics genre, because for the last couple years it's been really bothering me that I don't have a better way to classify those, because a classic is not really a genre. It just tells you when a book was written, and to me that's not super helpful. So my new classics genre is classics that were contemporaries at the time they were written. So this is like a realistic fiction kind of classic. So like I read The Princess and the Goblin last year, that went into fantasy, but I read an Oscar Wilde play, that went into classics. So I read 5 just plain contemporary classics, and with an average rating of 3.8 stars. Next I have poetry, and I read 5 poetry collections with an average rating of 4.6, which tells me that I should pick up more poetry because I tend to really enjoy it. And in fact, I think I have been reading more than I used to, and I've been really enjoying what I have read. Next we get into a couple of my lowest categories. The first one is new adult or adult romance, so like the romance genre specifically. I read 5 books, and my average rating was 2.7 stars. Which unfortunately was not a surprise for me, because you guys were probably aware as I went on my romance genre journey. I know it's only 5 books, but I was trying. I really wasn't finding things I liked. I'm having a really difficult time finding a romance novel that I even moderately enjoy. Yeah, and the reason actually that that's not lower is because I read a couple of Natalia Jaster's books last year, which I did enjoy more than the other ones I had been reading. So I definitely want to continue trying to find a romance novel I like. I have a couple on my TBR that I think are going to be hits for me, hopefully. But yeah, unfortunately I wasn't too surprised to see that really low number. And then dystopian, I only read 1 dystopian book, and it was 2.5 stars, which does not surprise me. I don't really like dystopians. Well, I realized I said I wasn't going to use it as an excuse to stop reading things, but I think this is a little different because I do think I have some other kind of dystopian-esque books that were mixed in with other genres, and those ones I did really enjoy. And finally, we're going to end with my most read genre, which should not surprise anybody, and that was fantasy. I read 67 fantasy novels with an average rating of 3.74 stars, which is, I think, pretty good. And I think the reason this one isn't higher than it is that fantasy is a genre, like obviously it's my favorite genre, it's my most read genre, and I think I'm also willing to take more chances with it than with some of these others, which I think means I sometimes end up with surprise favorites and sometimes I end up with really disappointing books. So I think that's why that one's a little lower than, let's say, my contemporary one, because I'm much more picky about contemporary. Okay, so those are all of the stats that I tracked. Again, they're like very minimal. So now I'm going to talk very briefly about my 2020 reading goals or plans. I have a Goodreads goal of 100 books this year. I hope to read more than that. I don't anticipate reading 226, but you never know. Also, real quick about the genre thing, I'm pretty sure I miscounted some things because I think when I added up those books, I don't think it actually added up to the right number of books I read. So either I made a mistake or Goodreads made a mistake. It was probably me. And also, I don't even remember if I counted rereads in those genre designations or not. I feel like all of the spreadsheet people are cringing at how haphazard these statistics were, and I don't blame you. That was a disaster. But back to reading goals. I also want to continue doing my physical TBR tracker, and I'm also doing a kind of reading journal or reading planner this year. This is not a bullet journal. I would not do well with a bullet journal, although I enjoy watching other people's. But this already has some of the really lovely spreads and things, and all of the artistic stuff is like already done for you, which I love. So far I've been really enjoying that. And this time I actually have a few specific goals, but I think they're in cases where it's something that I'm already excited about doing, so hopefully it won't feel like too much of a burden. One of them is I want to get my TBR maybe shelf on Goodreads under 50 books. That's a shelf where, just as it sounds like, they're books that I might be interested in, but I'm not sure. I'm not like officially ready to say I want to read them. Like maybe I'm waiting to hear more reviews, or maybe I just haven't decided if it's something I would enjoy. And I think it was at 85, and I think now I'm closer to like 65. So I've already been like getting that down quite a bit. Like I did part of that in December and part of it in January. So the ways I can remove books from that, I could either read them, I could just remove them from all of my want to read shelves altogether, or I could move a book from TBR maybe to the want to read shelf. Because I really do like having that kind of middle ground shelf, but I don't want it to become so full that it basically starts feeling like another TBR shelf. And then another specific goal is I want to focus on reading a few borrowed books that are not from the library. So these are like authors and series that I can borrow from like friends or family members who are often very excited about me reading them, and I just haven't gotten to them. Because I feel like when I'm thinking about books I want to read for my TBR, I have all of the books that I own that I want to get to, and I have library books that I want to get to because like they have a due date and everything. And ones that I know I can acquire but I don't actually own myself just kind of fall by the wayside. So for some examples of this are Rick Riordan's books. I have really been bad about staying caught up with those, although I will definitely be reading the first Magnus Chase book because I'm going to be a co-host for Demigods Anonymous, so that's really exciting. Frederick Backman, I really want to read some of his books. My mom really enjoys those. I've actually gifted her several of his books because I know she enjoys them, and I've just not read them. The Cormoran Strike series by J.K. Rowling, also known as Robert Galbraith. It's not the best person, but I read the first book and really enjoyed it, and again, I can borrow those books very easily, so I do want to get to those. And also the Princess Academy series by Shannon Hale. This is a series that my sister really enjoys, and I read the first book a really long time ago, and I liked it, but I wasn't super impressed. And then I recently read another of Shannon Hale's fantasy books, which was The Goose Girl, and I absolutely loved it. And I think this is going to be one of those series where it takes me being older to appreciate it, even though like it is a middle grade series and it's like I was in the target age range for it. I just, for whatever reason, I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't in the mood for it. But I really anticipate loving that series. My friend Kelly absolutely loves her books. And then finally, for specific challenges I want to do, once again, I am doing the Retelling Bingo challenge from Cornerfolds. I should have a TBR for that going up soon. They have different prompts this year, but I'm very excited about that. And then this year I'm also doing the Reading Women Challenge for 2020, which I actually already have that video up. I will link that one down below. So very excited about those. And then I also want to mood read more. And this is going to be really difficult to balance because I'm sort of in between a challenge reader and a mood reader. And I feel like I tend to lean more towards challenges and ignore the mood reading part of myself. But I really do enjoy mood reading and I want to get better about it. I remember last year for April, which was my birthday month, one of the things I decided to do as part of my birthday that would be fun is I only wanted to read books that I was really excited about that I thought I was going to love. Not like, this might be fun, I think I'd like this, but like this could be a 5-star book for me. And with a couple of exceptions for other things that I was trying to get read, that's what I did. And I loved it. It was like one of my best reading months all year, which I don't think is an accident. So it works. And like, I just want to do more of that. I also have a few channel or other kind of bookish adjacent goals. One of them is I want to ease up on readathon stress by not sharing every single book that I hope to get to. Because I think that's one of the things that makes me feel pressure is not that I'm doing readathons, because I love doing readathons, but the fact that if I talk about every book, then I feel like all of those books are assigned. So I think the way to do that is to like keep some spots open for books that I just want to mood read that I'll decide later. So that'll kind of affect a little bit the way I do like TBR or reading plan videos, but it won't be like a huge change, but I think it'll just make a difference for me, which will be nice. I also want to get back to filming book hauls. I might do these bi-monthly, like every 2 months, rather than trying to do one every month, or sometimes just letting it go until it's like a whole season or a season and a half, because that's a lot. I actually really enjoy book hauls, and I've just been lazy about doing them, basically. And I think that doing them is going to keep me more accountable with tracking my physical TBR. And I also just think they're fun videos to share and to watch, because the thing about book hauls that I love is that sometimes hearing why somebody picked up a book is what gets you excited about it. You know, not necessarily hearing it in a TBR or a wrap-up even, or a review, but somebody mentions some random tiny thing about the premise that is a buzzword for you. Like, I have found several favorite books like that through book hauls. I think they get a bad rap, but I enjoy them. And I'm also going to start doing something. It is an idea I am borrowing from my friend Kelly, who I mentioned earlier. Her channel is Cozy Reader Kelly, and she's absolutely wonderful. And every time she does a book haul, she does, for every book she buys, she donates $1 to a charity that supports literacy in some way. And I just think that's really wonderful. So I'm going to be doing that as well. Although I think for mine, I'm not going to limit it necessarily to reading related charities. I might change my mind about that in the future, but I don't know, I'm really excited about doing that. I think that's something that, as long as I am financially able to do that, that's something that's really important to me. And I really want to start doing that this year. I might also extend that to include like other just for fun items that I buy, like makeup is another one of my interests. So if I buy like a makeup palette or something, so I'm still figuring out how that's going to work, but I'm really excited about it. Another big channel goal that I want to do is continue my video series that I started. Because I really enjoy doing those kinds of like more creative videos, although I love doing the ones that are more staples as well. And I don't feel like I'm at a loss for ideas. It's just that I get excited about these video series. I do like the first one, I plan a bunch of others, and then I just never do any more of them. Like my pairing books with artwork video, that is probably one of my favorite videos I've ever done, like top 5. I loved that, and the response for that was great, and I just had so much fun with it, and it was just a great time. Have I done any more of them? No. So I want to do that again. I want to get back to my like weirdly specific recommendations video. I have a couple of other ideas for video series I want to do. So yeah, I want to continue creative video series. Like I've already done some. I loved doing them. There's no reason not to do more. And I think that one thing that's going to help with that is I want to film fewer time-sensitive videos. Or I don't want to feel so limited by time-sensitive videos. So like TBRs, for example, I do really like doing those, but I think I want to think of a way to schedule my videos where doing a TBR doesn't take one of my like video slots or whatever you want to call it away from doing another thing that I'm excited about. Even though I do enjoy TBRs and I am excited about them. So maybe what I'll end up doing is like you might get like a TBR from me and then like 1 or 2 days later you might get a completely different video. So hopefully you won't get sick of me. We'll see how that turns out. I also want to film more casual videos. One that I was especially thinking about was currently reading videos. I did a couple of those last year and I loved it. Surprisingly, it ended up being one of my favorite things to film because I think it takes some of the pressure off. Like I'm somebody who, I feel like if I sit down to film, it's like this big production. I have to do all of this prep, which I love. Obviously, I love filming and I love being on BookTube, but like having all that stress and work and like feeling like I have to get my words exactly right. Like if I'm doing a review or especially like wrap-ups, like I feel like there's that pressure to say things well. And the nice thing about currently reading videos is because I don't do reading vlogs, it's pretty much the only time I have to like just kind of chat about what I think about a book. So not worrying about putting it together in the best way or like coming up with a coherent review, but just like talking about what I'm thinking in the moment about that book. And I really loved that. Although I have been tagged in a book vlog tag, so you might actually see a vlog from me, but I just want to film more casual videos. And another video goal is I really want to catch up on the things I've been tagged in. I have a lot and I love being tagged in things and I really like doing tags. I think one of the things that prevents me from doing more of them or from doing them in a timely manner is that for me they're a lot of work. I know a lot of people use them as kind of quick and easy videos, which I totally get and that's great. I try to do mine more like recommendations videos and I try not to repeat books too often, which means that there's a lot of prep work that goes into my tag videos. And I think one way to get around this is I want to be able to post more at once. So I think what I'm going to be doing is kind of like tag compilations of 2, maybe 3 tags that are all kind of related in a certain theme. Dane from Dane Reads does this, Vendy from Caught Between Pages does this. She's actually the one who kind of themed them and that made me start thinking about that as a possibility for me. So hopefully you guys enjoy that. I will include timestamps, so if you only care about one of the tags then you can do that. I would just love to catch up on tags in 2020. And then my last goal, I'm a little afraid to even say this because I feel like once I officially say it, my anxiety can just like go to town, but I tentatively would like to go to BookNet Fest in 2020. There's a lot of things that have to kind of line up for that to happen, but I think I'm gonna do it. I would love to finally go and meet some of you guys and go to, like I've never actually been to like a book event like this before, so that would be interesting. I'm a little terrified, but I think I'm actually gonna try and do it this year. Okay everybody, so this is my kind of 2019 year wrap up and looking forward into 2020. I feel like this video was 1,000 years long. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!